Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Sophomore English. We turn in our textbooks now to pages 58, 59 and following. We're going to work with Lynne Cox's Swimming to Antarctica. Let's put this in our notes at 2B really quickly. The next two titles that we're going to study are what we call autobiography, nonfiction of course. Now, let's get this out of the way. Some of my sophomores say, I remember hearing about this in freshman year, but I'm still now a bit confused. The difference between biography, a story somebody writes about you, and autobiography, when you tell your own story. Now, the assumption is, true or false, that when you tell your own story, you tell your story not as fiction, that is to say you made it up, but rather as nonfiction. That is to say it's actually true. We're going to look at two of those. The first one is Lynne Cox. The second is a Maya Angelou piece. We will get to that in a while. The second thing I want to point out is our focus at 2B on page 59. Do you see it? For our literary analysis topic is author's perspective. Read it with me. Point of view, in other words. In a literary work, we're talking now judgments, attitudes, experiences the author brings to the subject. An author's perspective determines which details he or she includes, as in these examples. A writer with first-hand experience of an event might report his or her own reactions as well as generally known facts. A writer with a positive view of a subject might emphasize its benefits. A work may combine several perspectives. For example, a writer may tell what it felt like to live through an event. In addition, the writer might express his or her present views on the experience. As you read, look for details, including specific words, phrases that suggest the author's perspective. Also, put this in your notes at 2B. We're going to be making predictions as we go as well. We're going to revise, we're going to verify, and most importantly, we're going to ask questions. Let's introduce ourselves on page 60. Remember your vocab words on page 60 to prepare for the assessment. On page 61, let's introduce ourselves to this woman named Lynne Cox, born in 1957. One of the most amazing athletes in the history of the world. Now, we hear sport today and we think volleyball or basketball or soccer or something like that, football, right? Okay? But some of our greatest athletes are not athletes who participate in those kinds of sports, but somebody like Lynne Cox. Are you ready for this? Lynne Cox is a woman who jumps into the water and decides to see how far she can swim. Read with me. A little bit of background information just to blow your mind. Raised in California, Lynne Cox got started breaking records when she was young. At age 14, she swam 26 miles from Catalina Island to the California coast. At age 14. 26 miles. We could take most of you right now over to our swimming pool, have you jump in and swim 1 mile, and most of you would fail. Most of you would fail. You would say, can't do it. If I were to pay you money, you still would say, can't do it. At about half mile, your body would start breaking down. 26 miles, the distance of a marathon race. She swam it at age 14. The next year, she broke the men's and women's records swimming the English Channel, that area between England and France, which is some of the most dangerous water in the world because of the currents and stuff. A number of people have drowned trying to swim that thing. She swam it, as your book tells you, at the age of 15. Which begs a real question. What kind of mind does a person have to want to go to work doing something like that? Oh, no. We're just getting started, as you're about to hear. Notice, Cox, made to swim as you're heading here. Cox has a high percentage of body fat evenly distributed around her body. This fat helps her float and provides insulation. Her unique body has allowed her to swim in waters ranging from the Bering Strait to Antarctica. Today, Lynne Cox stands as the most successful cold water long distance swimmer ever. Hey, check this out, and then did you know? This will freak some of you out. During her swim around the Cape of Good Hope, Cox was chased by a shark as she was swimming in the ocean. Now, in the background information for swimming to Antarctica, cold water swimming. Swimming in frigid water, as Lynne Cox does, puts great stress on the body. The body's core, the heart, the lungs, the brain must stay warm or normal muscle and brain function will be impaired, a condition called hypothermia. Water temperatures as warm as 44 degrees Fahrenheit would kill most swimmers. Write that down. 44 degrees Fahrenheit will start to jack with your body. In this cutting, Lynne Cox is going to describe what it's like to be swimming in water that can be freezing. Read with me at the top of page 62. In 2002, swimmer Lynne Cox attempted an ambitious feat, swimming a mile in the frigid waters of Antarctica. She sailed on the ship Orva with a team of 7 friends, including team leader and her physicians. Right? She had doctors, obviously. Her agent scouted for danger as Cox swam. Dan Cohen stood by as a rescue swimmer. Scott Peely, a television producer, also came. The ship's crew included Dr. Anthony Block and expedition leader Susan Addy. Before attempting a mile, Cox tested her reactions on a shorter swim. We will now read about a person who gets in ice water and decides to swim for 1 mile. Something 99% of the people on this planet could not do. You could make the argument Lynne Cox is one of our best athletes living alive today because of some of the things she does. In other words, pick your favorite athlete from any sport you know, Cristiano Ronaldo. Throw him in this kind of situation, he can't do it. Physically cannot do it. There are very few humans that can do what you're about to read about. Hey, I want to challenge you. Really stay focused and conquer monkey mind. See how much of this reading you can get into and really see if you can stay up with the reading. Let's go to work with it now. Lynne Cox, amazing athlete. Let's go to work with it.
From Swimming to Antarctica by Lynne Cox. In 2002, long-distance swimmer Lynne Cox attempted the most ambitious feat of her career, swimming a mile in the frigid waters of Antarctica. Before setting out on her final swim, she tested her reactions by swimming in Antarctic water for over 22 minutes, closely monitored by her crew and doctors. When I returned to my cabin, I thought for a long time about what I was about to attempt. I had mixed feelings about the test swim. In some ways, it had given me confidence. I now knew that I could swim for 22 minutes in 33-degree water. But it had also made me feel uncertain. It had been the most difficult and probably the most dangerous swim I had ever done. Part of me wanted to be satisfied with it. Part of me didn't want to attempt the mile. I was afraid.
63, page 63.
Water temperature on the big swim would be a degree colder. 32 degrees. That was a magic number, the temperature at which fresh water froze. I wondered if in 32-degree water the water in my cells would freeze, if my body's tissues would become permanently damaged. I wondered if my mind would function better this time, if I would be able to be more aware of what was happening, or if it would be further dulled by the cold. Would my core temperature drop faster, more quickly than I could recognize? Would I be able to tell if I needed to get out? Did I really want to risk my life for this? Or did I want to risk failure?
Let's pause for a moment. Put it at level 1. An obvious question. We can even jot it down at 3B. Why? Right? I mean, some folks that read this with me, they're like, I'm sorry, what? She's getting into 32-degree water to go swimming for 1 mile. Why? Because that normally kills you. I mean, everybody kind of knows that. If you want to kill somebody, put them in 32-degree water and leave them there. They will freeze to death. Everybody knows that. Why would you do that? Notice her series of questions are questions even to herself. Which does beg an interesting question, though. Why do people try challenges? Why? And in what ways, 3B observation already, in what ways is the sophomore year a challenge that a whole lot of students often will try and walk away from? What is it with challenging yourself to do something you've never done before? Why do people do that, and how do you pull it off? Obviously, it takes a whole lot of courage, doesn't it?
The other part of me wanted to try, wanted to do what I had trained for, wanted to explore and reach beyond what I had done. That part of me was excited about venturing into the unknown. That part of me knew I would have felt a tremendous letdown if I didn't get a chance to try. I wanted to do it now. The next morning, on December 15, 2002, Susan called me up to the bridge. She pointed out Waterboat Point. The tiny gray beach between steep glaciers was completely blocked by icebergs and brash ice. There was no place to land. We continued sailing south through the Gerlache Strait, past mountain-high glaciers and by ship-sized icebergs ranging in shades of blue from juniper berry to robin's egg to light powder blue. In the protection of the Antarctic peninsula, the wind dropped off and the sea grew calmer. When we reached Naco Harbor about an hour later, Susan called me up to the bridge. She was excited. The beach was free of icebergs and brash ice. A landing was possible. Now I would have a chance to swim the first Antarctic mile. I was thrilled and scared, but I tried to remain calm. I knew that the weather could suddenly change and the swim would be off. I met with Barry Binder, who said, "I'll get the crew into the Zodiacs and come and get you when everything's set." I walked to the ship's library, drank 4 8-ounce cups of hot water, and ate 2 small croissants for breakfast. They were high in fat and carbohydrates, 2 sources of energy I would need for the swim. Then I started through the hallway to my cabin, where many of the Orlova's passengers were waiting, eager to find out if I was going to swim. They wished me luck and said they would wait for me at the finish. I stopped by Dan's cabin to ask him if he would jump into the water with me at the end of the swim. He was already in his dry suit, prepared to go. Everyone was doing what we had practiced. All I could do was go back to my room and wait. Gabriella came in to take a core temperature. It was up to 100.4 degrees. Knowing I was venturing into unknown waters, I must have psyched myself up so much that I increased my body temperature. Gabriella left me alone while I put on my swimsuit and sweats. I rubbed sunscreen on my face, but not on my arms or legs. It could make my skin slippery, and if my crew needed me to get out of the water quickly, that would create a problem. The night before, 3 of the crew had spotted a pod of 8 killer whales swimming into the Gerlache Strait.
Great.
They hadn't been moving fast. I hoped they were still north of us. I stared out the window at the brown, crescent-shaped beach. There were snow-covered hills directly above the beach and massive glaciers on either side. I picked out landmarks, places I could aim for so I'd know if I was on or off course. Dr. Block caught me at the top of the stairs just before we stepped out the door and onto the ramp, and asked if I would sit down on a step so he could trace 2 veins on my hands with a blue magic marker. It was just a precaution, he said, in case I needed emergency assistance. This way he would easily be able to find a vein to start an IV. I gave him my right hand and watched him draw the blue lines for the television camera. It gave me the creeps. Why did he have to do this now, right before I swam? Didn't he realize this kind of stuff psychs people out? I know the swim is dangerous, but he could have done this hours ago, not just before I swam. Get over it, I told myself. Shake it off. Take a deep breath. Refocus. Take another breath. Good. Now think about the swim. I smiled. I'm so ready for this. Walking to the door, I peeked out and felt a blast of icy wind hit my face from the northwest. It was blowing in off the glaciers in gusts to 25 knots, and the air temperature was 32 degrees. I felt the hair rising on my arms, and my jaw tightened to suppress a shiver. I was much more nervous than I had been during my first swim. I had greater expectations of myself now. I wanted to swim the first Antarctic mile, and I knew I would be very disappointed if I didn't succeed. I stared across the icy water at Naco Harbor's beach and felt excitement building within me. Quickly, before I could lose my chance, I pulled off my sweatsuit and shoes and stuck them in a corner of the ship, climbed down the gangway, sat on the platform, and
Page
dangled
65.
my feet in the water. Surprisingly, it didn't feel any colder than it had 2 days before. I didn't realize then that the nerves on my skin's surface had been damaged from the first swim. I didn't know that the nerves that signaled danger weren't firing. I wasn't aware that my first line of defense was gone. I had no idea that prolonged exposure in 32-degree water could cause permanent nerve and muscle damage. And I didn't know then that when an untrained person is immersed in water colder than 40 degrees, their nerves are cooled down so they can't fire at the neuromuscular level. After only 7 or 8 minutes, the person's body seizes up and they can't move. It was a good thing I didn't know any of this. All I knew was that I was ready. I took a deep breath, leaned back, and threw myself forward into the 32-degree water. When I hit the water, I went all the way under. I hadn't intended to do that. I hadn't wanted to immerse my head, which could overstimulate my vagus nerve and cause my heart to stop beating. Dog paddling as quickly as I could, I popped up in the water, gasping for air. I couldn't catch my breath. I was swimming with my head up, hyperventilating. I kept spinning my arms, trying to get warm, but I couldn't get enough air. I felt like I had a corset tightening around my chest. I told myself to relax, take a deep breath, but I couldn't slow my breath. And I couldn't get enough air in. I tried again. My body wanted air, and it wanted it now. I had to override that reaction of hyperventilating. I had to concentrate on my breath, to press my chest out against the cold water and draw the icy air into my lungs. My body resisted it. The air was too cold. My body didn't want to draw the cold air deep into my lungs and cool myself from the inside. It wanted to take short breaths so the cold air would be warmed in my mouth before it reached my lungs. I was fighting against myself. I noticed my arms. They were bright red, and I felt like I was swimming through slush. My arms were 32 degrees, as cold as the sea. They were going numb, and so were my legs. I pulled my hands right under my chest so that I was swimming on the upper inches of the sea, trying to minimize my contact with the water. I was swimming fast, and it was hard to get enough air. I began to notice that the cold was pressurizing my body like a giant tourniquet. It was squeezing the blood from the exterior part of my body and pushing it into the core. Everything felt tight. Focus on your breath, I told myself. Slow it down, let it fill your lungs. You're not going to be able to make it if you keep going at this rate.
Page 66.
It was...
Hey, let's write this down for a second at level 1. Notice this thing called self-talk. If you ever see athletes, like for example in baseball, you'll sometimes see this, where the batter will step out of the batter's box and the camera will come in on the face, and you'll notice that the batter is moving his or her lips. What is going on with that? Well, self-talk. Notice that we've got this self-talk in italicized. This is the stuff that's going on in her mind, trying to convince her, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, that kind of thing. All right, we're on page 66. Let's try and focus now. How does she get through this experience?
It wasn't working. I was laboring for breath harder than on the test swim. I was in oxygen debt, panting, gasping. My breath was inefficient, and the oxygen debt was compounding. In an attempt to create heat, I was spinning my arms wildly, faster than I'd ever turned them over before. Laura later told me that I was swimming at a rate of 90 strokes per minute, 30 strokes per minute quicker than my normal rate. My body was demanding more oxygen, but I couldn't slow down, not for a nanosecond, or I would freeze up and the swim would be over. An icy wave slapped my face. I choked and felt a wave of panic rise within me. My throat tightened. I tried to clear my throat and breathe. My breath didn't come out. I couldn't get enough air in to clear my throat. I glanced at the crew. They couldn't tell I was in trouble. If I stopped, Dan would jump in and pull me out. I still couldn't get a good breath. I thought of rolling on my back to give myself time to breathe, but I couldn't. It was too cold. I closed my mouth, overrode everything my body was telling me to do, held my breath, and gasped, coughed, cleared my windpipe, and relaxed just a little, just enough to let my guard down and catch another wave in the face. I choked again. I put my face down into the water, hoping this time I could slow my heart rate down. I held my face in the water for 2 strokes and told myself, relax. Just turn your head and breathe.
Page 67.
It was easier to breathe in a more horizontal position. I thought it might be helping. I drew in a deep breath and put my face down again. I knew I couldn't do this for long. I was losing too much heat through my face. The intensity of the cold was as sharp as broken glass. I'd thought that swimming across the Bering Strait in 38-degree water had been tough, but there was a world of difference between 38 degrees and 32. In a few seconds, the cold pierced my skin and penetrated into my muscles. It felt like freezer burn, like touching wet fingers to frozen metal. Finally, I was able to gain control of my breath. I was inhaling and exhaling so deeply I could hear the breath moving in and out of my mouth, even though I was wearing earplugs. I kept thinking about breathing, working on keeping it deep and even. That way I didn't have time to think about the cold. My brain wasn't working as it normally did. It wasn't flowing freely from one idea to another. It was moving mechanically, as if my awareness came from somewhere deep inside my brain. Maybe it was because my body was being assaulted with so many sensations, too different and too complex to recognize. Or maybe it was because my blood and oxygen were going out to the working muscles. I didn't know. For the next 5 or 6 minutes, I continued swimming, telling myself that I was doing well, telling myself that this was what I had trained for.
Page 68.
Then something clicked, as if my body had gained equilibrium. It had fully closed down the blood flow in my skin and fingers and toes. My arms and legs were as cold as the water, but I could feel the heat radiating deep within my torso and head, and this gave me confidence. I knew that my body was protecting my brain and vital organs.